walls between us. The first time Officer Mara Jennings looked at inmate 4471, she told herself it was pity, just pity, the kind of hollow sympathy any decent human being might feel watching a 26-year-old woman curl herself into the corner of a cold cement cell, arms wrapped tight around her own ribs like she was the only thing holding herself together. Mara had worked 4 years at Westbrook Correctional for women, and she had trained herself not to feel too much, not to carry anyone else's weight home with her. But the woman in cell 12, Nadia Reyes, had a way of making even the most guarded heart remember that it was still beating. Nadia had arrived at Westbrook on a Tuesday in October, when the sky outside the barred windows was the particular shade of gray that looks less like clouds and more like the world, forgetting color entirely. She had been convicted of armed robbery, and now a story that, when Mara eventually came to understand it fully, was less about crime and more about survival. Nadia had grown up in a part of the city where your options arrived like expired coupons, too little, too late, and mostly useless. She had a younger brother with a chronic illness and a mother who had worked 3 jobs until her body simply refused to cooperate. The night Nadia held up at the convenience store with a weapon that turned out to be a replica. She had already spent 17 days without a real meal, watching her brother's medication run out one small white pill at a time. The judge called it a threat to public safety. Nadia called it Tuesday. Mara hadn't known any of this in the beginning. What she knew was that Nadia was quiet, in a way that wasn't peace. It was the quiet of someone who had learned the hard way that speaking up only gives other people something to use against you. She kept her eyes low during roll calls, moved through the common areas like she was trying to take up as little space as possible, and at night Mara would sometimes pass her cell and hear the kind of silence that is actually the sound of someone crying without making a single sound. It was that silence, more than anything, that lodged itself somewhere beneath Mara's ribs and refused to leave. Mara was no stranger to loneliness herself. She had come out as gay at 22, to a family that responded with the particular cruelty of people who believe they are being kind by simply pretending the conversation never happened. She had built a life that was functional and respectable and deeply, profoundly empty. She poured herself into her work because work did not require her to be vulnerable. Westbrook was a place of rules and structure, and Mara was good at rules. She was firm but fair with the inmates, never cruel, never careless. The other officers respected her. The women inside the walls trusted her more than most. And for years that had felt like enough. It stopped feeling like enough the evening. Nadia Reyes sat alone at a table in the recreation room, reading a book with a broken spine, mouthing the words slightly as she read, and then stopped on a single page and stared at it for so long that Mara finally walked over and asked if she was all right. Nadia looked up, and for the first time since her arrival, she didn't look away. She said the book had a line in it about how some people spend their whole lives in cages they didn't build. She said she wasn't sure if that made her feel better or worse. And Mara, who had never in 4 years sat down uninvited at an inmate's table, pulled out the chair across from her and sat down anyway. What happened between them over the following months was not scandalous in the way people might imagine. It was not reckless or careless or driven by impulse. It was something quieter and more dangerous than that. It was understanding. It was the slow, terrifying process of 2 people recognizing each other across a divide that was not supposed to be crossable. Mara started leaving books from the staff library outside Nadia's cell, nothing flagrant, nothing that broke protocol. Just small offerings slid beneath the bars with the quiet intention of someone who wants to say, "I see you," without having the words for it yet. Nadia would finish each book in days and leave it back at the cell door with a single folded corner. On the page she had liked best, Mara would find those pages and read them slowly, understanding that Nadia was communicating something she also didn't have the language for. There were moments of terrible awareness and times when Mara stood at the end of the hallway and reminded herself with brutal clarity exactly who she was and exactly where they were. She was an officer. Nadia was an inmate. The institution she served had walls built precisely to prevent the kind of connection she was beginning to feel. She knew the consequences. She had watched a colleague lose her badge over something far less significant. She told herself to stop. She told herself this every morning for 3 months. And every evening she found herself slowing her walk past cell 12, listening for the soft sound of pages turning, feeling something loosen in her chest when she heard it. The night everything changed was in February, during a winter storm that knocked the power to the east wing and left the facility running on emergency generators. In the gray, flickering light, Nadia had a panic attack, a severe one, the kind that comes from years of compressed trauma finally finding the crack it needs to escape. Mara was the officer on duty. She went into the cell, which was within her authority, and she knelt down on the cold floor beside Nadia, who was shaking so violently that her teeth were clicking together. Mara did not think about protocol in that moment. She did not think about the cameras, or the report she would have to file, or the look on her supervisor's face in the morning. She put her hand on Nadia's back and talked to her the way you talk to someone you would not let drown, calmly, steadily, with a certainty she had to perform before she actually felt it. She told Nadia she was safe. She told her she was not alone. She told her that she mattered. 3 sentences she had perhaps never said to anyone with that much conviction. Nadia looked at her afterward with red-rimmed eyes and said something so quietly that Mara almost missed it. She said that no one had ever stayed. Not her father, not her friends after the arrest, not the lawyer who was supposed to believe in her innocence. She said she had started to believe staying was something other. People were built for, not her. And Mara, who had spent her entire adult life half leaving every room she entered, felt something in her own story crack open alongside Nadia's. If you believe in kindness and think love can survive, even the hardest of circumstances, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to believe in human connection today, because stories like this only reach the people who need them most when we carry them forward together. The months that followed were the most honest and the most difficult of Mara's life. She sought legal counsel quietly. She spoke to a prison reform advocacy group that had been petitioning Westbrook's administration for years. She documented everything, not to protect herself, though it did that too, but because Nadia's case had always deserved documentation. The replica weapon, the sick brother, the absence of prior record, the lack of adequate legal representation. Mara became the kind of witness Nadia had never had, not as an officer bending rules, but as someone using every rule available to her in service of something true. Nadia's case was reviewed. It took 8 months and the involvement of a legal aid organization that Mara had contacted on her own time, from her own phone, with her own hand shaking slightly as she typed the first message. The sentence was not overturned. The law does not often bend that gracefully, but it was reduced significantly, and Nadia was granted early release eligibility on the grounds of mitigating circumstances and model conduct. The morning Mara found out, she was standing in the break room with a cup of terrible coffee, and she cried, for the first time in years, alone, with her back to the door. Nadia walked out of Westbrook on a Thursday in late autumn, almost exactly 1 year after she had arrived. Mara was not on duty that morning. She had arranged it that way deliberately, understanding that she could not be the officer standing at the gate and also be the woman whose heart was tangled up in who was leaving. She was waiting in the parking lot outside the main gate in her own car. In her own clothes, on her own time. She had thought about this moment so many times that she had exhausted every version of what she might say. So when Nadia came through the gate and stopped at the sight of her, Mara said nothing at all. She just got out of the car and stood there in the cold morning air, and Nadia crossed the distance between them with the particular speed of someone who has been walking slowly for a very long time and has finally decided to run. What happened between them after that belongs to them, to the small apartment Nadia eventually made her own, to the Sunday mornings and the difficult conversations and the ordinary, sacred work of 2 people choosing each other in the full daylight of real life. It was not easy. It was never going to be easy. Mara eventually left Westbrook not under pressure, but because she had found something that mattered more to her than the safety of structure. She went back to school. She started working with the same advocacy group. She had first contacted for Nadia because she had learned that the world inside those walls contained multitudes of stories that deserved the kind of witness she had been for one woman on one cold February night. Nadia's brother got better, slowly, imperfectly, the way most good things happen. Nadia got a job, then a better one, then started taking classes at a community college 2 evenings a week, coming home to a life that was hers in a way nothing had ever been before. She never stopped reading. She still folded the corners of pages she loved, and Mara still found them and read them slowly. And between them there lived the language they had invented, in a place made of concrete and distance, a language built entirely out of the refusal to stop believing that connection was possible. Before we reach the end of Nadia and Mara's story, drop a word in the comments. Just one word for what this story made you feel. Brave, soft, seen, hopeful. Whatever it stirred in you, let it live somewhere outside of you for a moment. Your words matter here. Love does not ask permission. From the walls we build around ourselves, or the ones built around us by systems and circumstance, it arrives in the flickering light of a power outage, in the folded corner of a borrowed book, in the sound of someone's breathing, slowing down because another person decided to stay. Mara and Nadia did not find each other in spite of where they were. They found each other because of who they chose to be in that place, honest and present, and stubbornly unwilling to let the other become invisible. That choice, made over and over again in small and quiet moments, is what love actually looks like when it is real. Not grand, not perfect, just two people standing in a parking lot on a cold Thursday morning, deciding that the distance between them is finally small enough to cross